living out a story, and that story is far greater than we often give it credit for. Most people move through their days as though what they are experiencing is common, ordinary, unimportant. But the truth is, God has designed every life to be a part of His great adventure. The moments that may seem routine, the conversations we think are small, the detours that frustrate us, all of it is being woven into a narrative that points to His purpose. Your life is not just happening by accident. It's being authored by the Creator of the universe, and He does not write meaningless chapters. Think about the way a story unfolds. There's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. There are characters who play roles, settings that shape the events, conflicts that create tension, and resolutions that bring clarity. Now imagine that same structure at work in your life. The beginning was set long before you ever drew your first breath. God knew you, He formed you, and He wrote you into His eternal plan. That means the middle, the part you are living right now, matters deeply because it's being written line by line, choice by choice, step by step, and one day, when the final chapter of your earthly journey closes, the story will stand as a testimony of whether you embraced the adventure He placed before you. So often, people believe that their story doesn't matter because it doesn't look like someone else's. They see the highlight reels of others and wonder why their own pages seem so quiet or so ordinary. But what we fail to realize is that every page carries weight. Even the hidden chapters that no one else ever sees are shaping the person you're becoming. The adventure isn't only about the public moments, the achievements, or the recognition. It's about the unseen faithfulness, the silent prayers, the steady obedience when nobody is clapping or watching. God values those pages just as much as He values the climactic moments of breakthrough. And let me tell you, when God writes a story, He never wastes a scene. The parts of your life that feel like wandering are often the very sections where He's teaching you to trust Him. The moments of waiting, of unanswered questions, of confusion and longing, they aren't wasted time, they are essential time. They are the in between chapters that give depth to the plot. You may not understand why He allows certain things to unfold, but if you trust Him as the author, you can rest in the truth that the story is still moving forward. Even detours eventually lead you back to the main path He designed. You see, this great adventure is not about perfection, it's about participation. It's about being willing to lean into the journey, no matter how uncertain the next page may feel. Too many people close their book too early. They give up on their dreams. They lose sight of God's promises, or they settle for living someone else's story. But the Lord did not call you to be a copy of another person's script. He has written one specifically for you, one filled with opportunities that are designed to grow you, challenge you, and bless you. And when you embrace it, you begin to see that your story is not just about you. It's about pointing others to the one who is worthy of all glory. Every life is a story waiting to be told, and every story is an adventure waiting to be lived. The question is not whether your life has meaning. The question is whether you will choose to live it with faith, with courage, and with trust in the author who knows the ending from the beginning. Because when you do, you discover that your life, in all its ups and downs, is part of something far greater than you ever imagined. Would you like me to expand? Key point 2, there's next in the same 600-word seamless style so the speech continues naturally. Life has a way of asking us questions, doesn't it? Not always the kind we expect, not always the kind we can answer in a sentence, but questions that strike deep into who we are and what we believe. Every day, in one form or another, we're faced with questions that shape the course of our journey. They may not come in the form of an interviewer sitting across the table with a list in hand, but make no mistake, they're real, and how we respond to them determines the kind of story our lives will tell. Some of those questions sound simple at first. Will you choose faith, or will you give in to fear? Will you hold on to hope when the evidence around you tells you otherwise? Will you forgive the person who wronged you, or will you carry the weight of bitterness a little longer? These aren't just casual curiosities, they are life-defining questions. And in God's great adventure, He allows them to come not to confuse us, but to reveal the depth of our trust in Him. Think about the way Scripture shows us these very moments. Abraham was asked a question the day God told him to leave his homeland. Will you stay where it's comfortable, or will you follow me to a place you've never seen? David was asked a question when he stood before Goliath. Will you shrink back in fear like everyone else, or will you believe that I am bigger than this giant? Even the disciples faced questions every time Jesus called them to step away from their nets, their families, their security, and follow Him. Each one had to decide, will I answer with faith, or will I let hesitation rob me of the adventure God has prepared? And it's no different for us today. Every single one of us is sitting in that interview chair, whether we realize it or not. Life asks us questions through circumstances, through relationships, through challenges, and even through our own weaknesses. Sometimes the questions come in the form of loss. Will you still believe God is good? Sometimes they come in the form of opportunity. Will you trust that God has equipped you for this moment? And sometimes they come in the form of silence. When the heavens feel quiet, will you wait patiently, or will you give up and walk away? The thing about these questions is that they are never designed to expose us as failures. They're meant to reveal where our faith really rests. They are divine invitations to lean closer to God, to listen more carefully, to remember that He has already gone ahead of us. It's in the answering that our lives gain direction, because every yes to God opens up new doors of adventure, and every no rooted in fear or pride closes us off from what He has prepared. So many people think their lives are shaped by big opportunities or monumental decisions. But often, it's the quiet, consistent answers to life's questions that shape us most. Will you pray when you'd rather worry? Will you speak kindness when anger comes more naturally? Will you choose integrity when compromise seems easier? These daily questions don't always feel dramatic, but they are chiseling out the person you are becoming, and they are writing the testimony others will one day read in your life. Every question is really an invitation to trust God more deeply, to lean into His wisdom, and to allow His Spirit to shape our responses. And when we answer with faith, we find ourselves stepping into places we never thought possible, places where His grace carries us and His strength sustains us. That is how life's questions become the very building blocks of our great adventure. The questions will keep coming, but the beauty is that we never have to answer them alone. For the one who calls us is faithful, and He has already given us everything we need to respond with courage. One of the greatest truths about the adventure God calls us to is that it can never be lived from the safety of a comfort zone. Comfort is attractive, isn't it? It feels secure, predictable, manageable. We like routines, we like familiarity, and we like knowing what's around the corner. But the truth is, nothing extraordinary ever happens there. Growth doesn't happen there. Faith doesn't thrive there. and purpose is never discovered there. If you and I want to experience the fullness of God's adventure, we have to be willing to step beyond what feels safe and into what requires trust. Every story worth telling involves a moment where someone had to leave behind what was known in order to discover what was possible. Think of Moses standing before the burning bush. He wanted reasons, he wanted guarantees, but God simply told him to go. Think of Peter in the boat. The storm was raging. The waves were high, and Jesus called him to step out onto the water. In both moments, the question was the same: will you stay where it's safe, or will you take the step of faith? And the same question is asked of us every day. Stepping out of comfort zones doesn't always mean moving across the world or giving up everything you have. Sometimes it's as simple as speaking a word of encouragement when fear tells you to stay silent. Sometimes it's taking on a responsibility that stretches you in ways you never thought possible. Sometimes it's trusting God with your finances, your family, your future, even when nothing makes sense. The challenge is not always in the size of the step, but in the willingness to take it at all. The reason comfort zones are so dangerous is because they convince us that safety is the goal of life. But God did not call us to a life of safety. He called us to a life of faith. Safety says, stay where you are, don't take risks, don't move forward. Faith says, step out, trust me. I am already there. And when we live for safety, we miss the miracles. Nobody ever walked on water by staying in the boat. Nobody ever discovered God's provision by holding on to what they already had. And nobody ever experienced the joy of His calling by refusing to leave behind the familiar. Yes, stepping out requires risk. It requires courage. It requires surrender. And it will always feel uncomfortable in the beginning, but that's the very place where God meets us. That's where dependence on Him becomes real, where prayer becomes essential, and where His power becomes visible. We don't see the hand of God until we place ourselves in a situation where only His hand can carry us. That's the heart of the great adventure, learning to rely not on our own strength, but on His. And let me remind you, when you step out, you won't step out alone. The same God who called Abraham to leave his home, who called Joshua to lead Israel into the promised land, who called Esther to risk her life before the king, is the same God who calls you. His Spirit is within you, His promises are beneath you, and His presence is around you. The only thing holding many of us back is fear of the unknown. But the unknown to us is not unknown to Him. He already stands on the other side of the step He's asking you to take. So when you sense God nudging you, when you feel Him asking you to trust Him in a new way, don't retreat into the safety of what you know. Take the step beyond the comfort zone, because that's where the adventure begins. If there is one discipline that seems to grow rarer in our noisy, fast-paced world, it is the discipline of listening. We live surrounded by constant voices, phones buzzing, media shouting, opinions being thrown at us from every direction. And in the middle of all that noise, we can miss the most important voice of all. Yet every great adventure with God depends on our ability to pause, to quiet our hearts, and to truly listen. Listening is not just about hearing words. It's about paying attention to what is being spoken beneath the surface. It's about leaning in, waiting, discerning. And if you look through Scripture, you'll find that some of the most defining moments in the lives of God's people came not in the noise of the crowd, but in the stillness of listening. Elijah learned this on the mountain. He expected God in the wind, in the earthquake, in the fire, but God's voice came in a gentle whisper. And had Elijah not been willing to listen, he might have missed it. The same is true in our lives. God often speaks in ways that don't overwhelm, but in ways that require attentiveness. He whispers through His Word when we slow down enough to read it, through prayer when we wait instead of rushing through our lists, through the counsel of people He places in our path, and even through the circumstances that shape our days. The adventure He is leading us on requires us to be listeners, not just talkers. Too often we rush ahead with our own plans, filling the silence with our words, when what He's asking us to do is to stop and hear what He is saying. But listening is more than just tuning our ears to heaven. It's also about listening to the people God has strategically placed in our journey. Every person you encounter has something to teach you. The wisdom of a mentor, the encouragement of a friend, the honesty of a child, the insight of someone who has walked a different road, all of these voices can become part of God's way of guiding us. If we are too busy talking, too busy defending, too busy planning, we might miss the very instruction He is giving through them. And then there are the lessons embedded in circumstances. Sometimes God doesn't need to say anything new. He simply allows a situation to unfold that speaks louder than words. A closed door may be His way of saying, "Not here, not now." A delay may be His way of saying, "Wait on me." An unexpected opportunity may be His way of saying, "This is the moment you've been preparing for." But to recognize these things, we have to listen not just with our ears, but with our hearts. We have to become sensitive to His presence, aware that He is always communicating, even in silence. Listening takes humility. It requires us to admit that we don't know it all, that our way isn't always best, and that wisdom doesn't always come packaged the way we expect. It slows us down in a world that worships speed. It teaches us patience in a culture that prizes immediacy. And it grounds us in dependence on God instead of dependence on ourselves. The great adventure is not just about running, climbing, and conquering. It's also about waiting, resting, and listening. Because sometimes the most courageous step you can take is not forward, but still enough to hear the whisper of the one who is leading you. And when you learn to listen, you'll discover He's been speaking all along. One of the hardest truths for us to embrace on this journey is that trials are not detours, they are pathways. We often see them as interruptions, as obstacles standing in the way of where we want to go. We think, if only I could get past this season, if only I didn't have to deal with this hardship, then I could really step into the life God has for me. But what we fail to see is that those very trials are part of the adventure itself. They are not delaying us from reaching the destination. They are shaping us for it. Think about the heroes of faith. Joseph could have easily believed his trials were detours. Being betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and forgotten in prison, those seasons didn't look like pathways to purpose. But in hindsight, every trial was preparing him for the role God had ordained, a role that would save nations in a time of famine. Without the trials, he would not have had the wisdom, the humility, or the dependence on God necessary for that position. What felt like delays were actually essential steps in the journey. We tend to want shortcuts. We want the promised land without the wilderness, the crown without the cross, the testimony without the test. But God knows better. He knows that trials refine us in ways nothing else can. They strip away pride, they deepen our dependence, they remind us of His faithfulness, and they strengthen our faith for the greater battles ahead. Trials are classrooms where character is forged, and without them, we would not be ready for the victories that await. There's a beauty in realizing that even in suffering, God is not absent. In fact, He is closer than ever. David declared in the Psalms, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." That means when life feels heavy, when the weight of pain or disappointment seems unbearable, that is the very moment when His presence surrounds you most. The enemy wants you to believe that trials are proof God has abandoned you. But in reality, they are often the very stage on which His glory is displayed most clearly. Consider the refining process of gold. It is placed into the fire, not to be destroyed, but to be purified. The fire exposes the impurities, burns away the excess, and leaves behind something stronger, more valuable, more beautiful. That's exactly what trials do for us. They feel like fire, but they are producing something in us that cannot be produced any other way. And when we emerge, we don't just come out as survivors, we come out as testimonies of His grace. Sometimes trials are not only about us, but about the people who are watching our lives. How you respond to hardship may become the very encouragement someone else needs. Your endurance might inspire someone else's faith. Your hope in the middle of pain might be the light that guides another person through their own darkness. In that way, your trial becomes not just your pathway, but also theirs. So the next time you find yourself in a season that feels like a setback, remember this: you are not off track. You are right where God has allowed you to be, and He is using it to prepare you for something greater. What looks like a detour in your eyes is often the main road in His. And when you look back one day, you'll realize that the places of pain were also the places of the deepest growth, the richest faith, and the clearest evidence of His hand at work. Trials are not detours, they are pathways, and they lead us closer to Him. When it comes down to it, the great adventure of life isn't just about the moments we experience, the challenges we overcome, or the victories we celebrate. It's about the story our lives are telling every single day. Whether you realize it or not, you are living out an interview, and your answers are being written not in words on a page, but in the choices you make, in the way you treat others, in the way you trust God when circumstances test you. Your life is the testimony, and people are watching, listening, and learning what you believe by how you live. At the end of the day, what really matters is not how polished your words were, not how impressive your accomplishments looked, but how faithfully you lived out the calling God placed on you. Did you trust Him when everything in you wanted to give up? Did you stand strong when fear pressed hard against your heart? Did you walk in obedience even when it cost you something? Those are the answers that define the adventure. Those are the responses that echo far beyond this life. Think for a moment about those who have influenced you the most. Chances are it wasn't just what they said, but how they lived. Maybe it was a parent whose quiet faith never wavered even in hardship. Maybe it was a friend who chose kindness when bitterness would have been easier. Maybe it was a teacher, a mentor, or a neighbor whose consistency showed you what it meant to walk with God day after day. Their lives spoke louder than their words because they were living the interview out loud. And that is exactly what God is calling us to do. He's not asking us to have all the right answers lined up like a script. He's asking us to let our lives become the answer. Every step of obedience, every act of love, every word of encouragement, every sacrifice of faithfulness, those are the responses that demonstrate what we believe. It's not about perfection, but about authenticity. People aren't drawn to flawless lives, they're drawn to real lives lives that reveal God's grace at work even in weakness. The truth is, your life will tell a story one way or another. It will either reflect a trust in God that points others to Him, or it will reflect a trust in self that fades when the storms come. And storms will come. Trials will test us, opportunities will challenge us, questions will confront us. But in those very moments, the answers of our lives will shine the brightest. A life that says, "I will trust Him no matter what," is a life that leaves an eternal impact. The adventure God has given you is not about making yourself the hero of the story. It's about showing, through the way you live, that He is the faithful author from beginning to end. Every day you get the opportunity to live that story out loud, to let others see your faith in action, to show them that following Christ is not about words alone, but about a life surrendered to Him. And when the interview of your life is finished, when the pages are complete and your story is told, may it be said that you lived with courage, with faith, and with a heart fully surrendered to the one who called you. Because in the end, that is the only answer that matters.